All right. We should be almost on the record at this point, I would think. Okay, yeah, it says we're on YouTube. All right, guys. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Semak. Rosh Kadash. Festival of Unleavened Bread, everyone. I know some people are starting tonight. Um, and as a lot of us, we started last night at the 15th. Okay. So we are going to be doing a study today for the first high day of unleavened bread. And so we're going to be starting off with the Feast of Unleavened Bread study that we did a couple of years ago. So all I kind of did was I kind of just finely tuned it a little bit. I found something interesting for those of you that use Google Docs like me, and you're worried about, killing your hotspot or Wi-Fi when you're trying to type up a document. I just found out recently you can turn offline access on. So you can actually edit your document off the internet. So when I found that out this morning, I thought that was pretty cool. So you can actually I can turn my Wi-Fi off right now if I really had to and continue fixing a document. So all right, let's see here. It's all right, Mom. Okay, so Festival of Masa Unleavened Bread 2025. So here we go. So we're going to start it off. Mom, would you like to start us off in Exodus 12, 15 to 20? Okay. And also verse 39, if you can. I'll try to put the screen on for everyone listening. Okay. NIV. Okay. Let's see here. You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. You want me to start?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. For 7 days, you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your houses. For whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the seventh must be cut off from Yashrael. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and another one on the seventh day. Do no work at all on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month, you are to eat bread made without yeast from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days, no yeast is to be found in your houses, and whoever eats anything with yeast in it must be cut off from the community of Yashrael, whether he is an alien or native born. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. Now, what was the other verse that you said?
All right, let's before we go to the verse 39, I do kind of want to go and talk about something that I'm pretty sure Sister Marissa, you have heard with confusion around this time of year with the yeast and all that. I'm not too keen on a translation that does yeast. And they say yeast instead of leaven. The reason why is historically, okay, they were not removing baking soda out of their houses. Okay, they were not removing yeast by itself out of their houses. So I'm not trying to attack the NIV here, but I see a lot of these modern versions do this, and they're confusing people of what you're supposed to get out of your house. You're supposed to get leaven. Leaven is the word in the Hebrew and the Greek. Leaven is not yeast by itself. Okay, yes, when you put yeast or leavening agent in to make your bread, yes, by default, the bread becomes leavened, but that's because you're adding water to the yeast. So this is where it's a little deceptive. Go ahead, brother. I don't know if you were going to touch on that
Yeah,
because I saw you had your hand up.
I was gonna say that you can. remove all the yeast from your house. It's physically impossible because the yeast is in the air. When you mix water with flour, the yeast in the air begins to go and feed off of the flour, creating a leavening. Uh, uh, it starts to leaven because the yeast in the air mixes with the water in the flour. So like it's impossible to remove all the yeast. So it couldn't be saying remove the yeast. It has to be saying remove the leaven.
But isn't it more
Yeah.
of a spiritual leaven? Like,
It's really both. It's
so
both. It is physical. It's just that people don't understand what leaven is. Like Brother Yahusha is saying, like for you to have something leavened, you have to activate it.
That's
It's not activated, can't be leavened. So baking soda in your cupboard does not need to be removed. What's other ones, Mom, that can be considered a leavening agent? Like natural things that are not even baking soda. That without water they can't be leavened.
right, right.
I know you talked about some last year. What was some of them?
Well,
Like that you usually put in dough instead of baking soda or baking powder.
well, I use just yeast. I put a package
Because I know there's other ones out there. I've heard other people use different type of ingredients.
Just looking up to see, just for my own, satisfaction, whether they considered cornstarch.
Yeah.
And cornstarch, I found, is not. It's a thickener. It's not a rising or a leavening agent.
Yeah.
But I think it's basically either the yeast or the baking soda.
Yeast, baking soda. I heard there was something else. I
recall
one year I was looking into it.
Beer is considered to have.
Well, that's different type of yeast. That's not what they're talking about.
Okay.
They're not talking. Beer yeast is not going to make alcohol rise. Alcohol can't rise. It doesn't.
It's going to make your stomach.
Yeah, it's so. Who is talking about leavening, we need to understand it's talking about something that has risen.
Right.
But bread rising, for bread to rise, it has to have a leavening agent in it. That's what Yahuwah is telling you to get out of your home. A sourdough starter, okay? A lot of our people out there that live on a farm can tell you about this. Sourdough starter, okay? This is how they would keep a sourdough starter in a jar year long to help them make sourdough bread that rises. You can't have a sourdough starter, though, unless it's activated.
Yeah.
With water in it. So what I'm trying to say is you could have a packet of yeast in your cupboard and that's not leaven. This is why I don't like the reason I brought this up about the NIV and these modern Bibles. Yeast is a bad word to use. It's confusing people. It's not dictating what Yahuwah is talking about, even commanding us here. He's commanding us to get rid of your sourdough starters, get rid of leavened bread. If you have a loaf of bread, get that out. It has leavening in it. Food that has leavening in it. Wine was most likely drank on Passover and during the week of unleavened bread. They were not concerned about yeast from wine or yeast from beer. This is where you start getting to the rabbinicalness. Okay, I'm going to let Brother Yahusha go, and I know Sister Marissa was right after him, so go ahead. Or is that an old hand, brother?
No, I was going to say one thing that helps in figuring this out, clearly the text is clear, but, just one thing that I've found that helps is look beyond the Strongs. If the Strongs is not giving you what you need, look at the word and look at how look at how it functions throughout the text, right? Like leaven, what do you see its function as all throughout the text, right? It's something that when put into something else, it begins to spread, right? It begins to for instance, the parable of the woman with the measures of flour. When you see her take the leaven and put it into the flour, it slowly begins to spread throughout all the flour. So that action alone shows you the function of leaven. So if you know its function, you can have it get its definition, right? That's clearly not yeast, because dried yeast is not going to spread throughout flour.
Go ahead, sister.
Okay, so this is my question. If you have bread in your house and it says get okay, like you said, you shouldn't have a bread starter, you shouldn't have a sourdough starter. What if that bread is already done? Does that constitute as leaven? If the bread, let's say you have bread in your house, the bread has already been leavened. I mean, it's already been made. Does that still constitute as leaven? That's my question.
Oh, definitely.
Thanks.
Definitely. That would be, I would say, one of the more obvious applications would be if you've baked a regular, like, homemade baked bread, you put the yeast packet in there with the water and it got activated and risen. Any type of bread that has risen is leavened. So I'll give you an
What I
example.
mean, I guess I didn't make myself clear. Let's say you bought bread at the store and you
Yes.
brought the bread in. You didn't make the bread. You didn't leaven the bread.
No,
It's
but it's in there.
it doesn't matter anything that's
It's
leavened.
in the loaf of bread.
This is
yeah.
why
Okay.
we stopped buying. I'll be honest, our household, we stopped buying bread like a month before Passover, usually, like, or close to it, like
Yeah.
2-3 weeks before the night of Passover, so we don't have to be throwing out food.
Mhm.
We usually do that. That's just a custom of ours. It's not required. You're not
Mhm.
required to have to do it until the first day of unleavened bread starts, but it's just easier for us. It's less food we have to waste, and we try to like ahead of time get used to eating unleavened bread before going into the.
I screwed up so
feast.
bad last year that
Yeah,
I started a couple months ahead of time just because I mean, like, I keep breadcrumbs in the house. I
Yeah.
keep
any of that stuff.
Bisquick,
Yeah.
all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
And so I had to, as a matter of fact, Michelle is holding on to a bag of stuff
yeah,
that I gave her to hold on to for the week. Just things I didn't want to have to throw out, and I told her, whatever you want to use of it, use it,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
any which way,
Definitely.
yeah. Last year I screwed up oh my gosh.
And actually, the bread part, to go piggyback off of Marissa's question, the bread part is the most obvious part.
Yeah.
Because he's saying bread with it like every time. He's saying
Mhm.
don't eat anything leavened. Don't eat leavened bread. He's constantly saying that. So
Yeah.
as far as leavening goes, the number one thing you want to do, stop buying leavened bread once you get into like a beeb. Like, you want to, because you only got about 2 weeks when the new year starts after that new moon, and then you're at the first of Abib, you only got about 13, 14 days. So my suggestion to people that bought bread by mistake, just repent about it and try to get it out as soon as you can. I understand you didn't do it, but Yahuwah is saying in general, it should not be found in your houses for 7 days. So the point is, whether you made it or someone else made it and you bought it, it can't be found in your dwelling places.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the point. So this is why it's just easier on us. It's not exactly commanded to stop buying leavened bread almost a month beforehand, but it makes it easier. Like, we barely had to do any removing like last night at all. Like, usually we're racing and we're going crazy. Oh my goodness, we got to get these Progresso breadcrumbs out of here. We got to get Bisquick, because even though it's powder, even though it doesn't look leavened, breadcrumbs are made from leavened bread. Like, they mush them up.
That's right.
To make the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, that's
Same
right.
thing with Bisquick. Bisquick originates with leavening.
Mhm.
So a lot of stuff we don't even realize has leavening in it. Anything like that's is like any type of grain that has leavening in the label. Now a whole different question might be yeast extract. Anyone that doesn't know that's actually a code name for monosodium glutamate.
Yeah.
MSG. It's not yeast.
True.
So don't worry about your spices. I mean, it's not good to use spices that have MSG in them anyway, but I'm just saying, if you're worried about getting rid of spices or little things that say yeast extract, that's not yeast or leaven. So, but if anything you have says leavening in the ingredients, you have to get rid of by the 15th of Abib. So that's kind of like last night for our group. since we started our first day of unleavened bread last night, that would have been the cutoff point. We had to get everything out last night. So, and trust me, don't feel bad if you messed up. Just our household has at least messed up 2 or 3 times the whole time that I've been keeping Torah, which is way back from 2015. It's been at least 2 or 3 years out of all those years where we screwed up. So don't feel bad if you bought something too late. It's just it's a lesson to learn that you want to kind of keep track.
Yeah.
And like Sister Marissa brought up too, the spiritual leavening is just as important.
Yes.
I think Brother Yahusha was about to bring that up. That's not just spiritual, it's physical. What I believe spiritual leavening was when Messiah said, be careful of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He mainly was talking about their theology.
Yeah, that's right.
Theology, doctrine. So this is why he says, be careful. You know, this is why we're told by Paul later on, be careful who you fellowship with. Be careful who you gather with, because we're not supposed to gather with everyone. And that's kind of Paul's message in a lot of his letters. Be careful because there's wolves out there. Be careful because there's false teaching out there. And so that's one of the spiritual leavens. I do think sin can also be considered spiritual leaven, even though it's not outright said it in the Passover accounts and the Besor accounts that he explains it as sin. I think theology, though, bad theology is a type of sin, because bad theology could cause you to add to the word, take away from the word, can cause you to either go on a wrong calendar, which you're breaking Torah. If you keep the feast the wrong time of the year, you're breaking Torah. If you keep the feast wrong because of your theology, you're breaking Torah. So, I mean, leaven can refer to sin. And it's kind of like by association, if you got leaven in theology, there's probably sin in your life. You know, I mean, that's usually how it goes. So I don't know if Brother Yahusha was going to touch on that, but it's kind of like it's connected. Like you can't divorce bad theology from sin. You know, so I don't know, brother. Go ahead. I know you had your hand up, but I'm sorry about that for taking so long.
I already shared.
Okay. Okay, I got confused because I kept seeing hands up and down. I'm like, what's going on? All right. Yeah. But anyway, let's see. Let's go back to, we did what? Exodus 12.
There was one more verse.
Verse 20. Yeah.
30 something.
39, I think, but let me just make sure that's the right verse. Okay, wrong document. What the heck? Okay, I need to open another one now. Okay.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're right with that.
39? Okay, go ahead.
With the dough they had brought from Egypt, they baked cakes of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves.
So obviously, right, they're going that night. So they're going, and I shared a scripture on Telegram earlier to prove our belief that they did not leave Egypt the night of the Passover. They left the following night. And I was kind of mentioning on Telegram earlier that I don't like how certain translations will say that night. It makes you think they're leaving on the 14th or at midnight, which is not what's happening. So I have a big pet peeve about stuff like that. Let me see if I can find the screenshot.
Because they were still in their house. Some of
them say, some versions say that night or by night. By night, Hebraically, would mean the following evening. So you can kind of see what it's actually trying to say if they're not paraphrasing. So let me just, 1 second. I don't know why this is so far up on the Telegram. Okay. You see, hopefully, I see why. Okay, hold on. So let me go back to the Exodus 12. It was either Exodus 12 or 13. So
I think it's 12:31.
Yeah, this is the one I'm talking about. So it says, by night, Pharaoh called them and said to them, rise and depart from my people. And both you and the children of Israel go and serve Yahuwah as you say. So this is the night that they're being sent. So they're being sent when the 15th begins. It gets kind of confusing when you got versions that say that night. Because then people are thinking, I'm pretty sure Brother Yahusha would agree with me, with wording like that night, people are going to be thinking it's the previous night when the destroyer's doing what he's doing. So then you're saying that there was not even a gap between the destroyer doing what he did on the night of the 14th between that and them leaving Egypt, which then creates more issues because then Exodus 12 would be saying something different from the book of Numbers, because the book of Numbers is actually saying that they left. Let's see here, right here. I think it's Numbers 30 something. Okay, so you got right here. Oh no, that's different. Okay, but that's important too. Let me see. Let me go up. What the heck? I hate this, man. I hate how this Telegram thing sometimes goes too far up. Okay. Huh. Oh, here we go. It's from last night. That's why. Okay. So Numbers 33, verse 3. They departed from Ramesses in the first month on the 15th day of the first month. So the night that Exodus 12 is talking about, that Pharaoh went to them, can't be the 14th. It can't be the night of the 14th. It has to be the night of the 15th when the 15th starts. Okay. On the day after the Passover, the children of Israel went with a high hand before all the Egyptians. So Numbers 33 is telling you the context of Exodus 12:31. You see what I'm saying? So, but these versions with that night, what night? Because you have the night of the destroyer doing what they did, and then you have the night they leave. Go ahead, brother.
Glad we didn't get those. So I think that wording alone supports our viewpoint because we've talked about how there are
Okay.
three different viewpoints in Yahusha's time, but because it says um, one, it says that they went out on that night, and then two, it says that they went out on the day after the Passat. So both of those are in alignment, right? They went out because the day starts in the evening. So if evening starts and they went out that night, meaning starting at B15 after the Passat, that means that the Passat had already been finished. I don't know if that makes sense or if I said that correctly. Maybe you can reiterate.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Because I was just reading that in different versions, and by night just made a little bit more sense to me because you got the previous midnight where he's waking up, and then it says by night he went to talk to them. So it's like you had the gap of time of the next day until that sunset. So I don't know. I don't know. To me, that night I could see people take. Oh yeah, yeah. Because to me it's just really strange for them to leave it as that night because it's kind of like the to explain it's like the Masoretic text in Leviticus 23 saying the day after the Sabbath. Which Sabbath? Because it's like it's really confusing. Go ahead, brother.
I'll have to come back around. I got my hand.
Okay. Okay. So but anyway, to me it's just confusing with certain translations like that. Like when they're making it a little too word for word to where it's not really giving you the context. And I've seen people take that as meaning that, well, they actually left. They left, the 14th and all that. Or they'll use it as the Passover had to be eaten on the 15th because it says that night. And they'll try to combine the two nights as the same night. And I've seen people do that. And like they'll try to combine the midnight when the destroyer destroyed the firstborn of Egypt, they'll try to combine that with the same night that they're supposedly leaving Egypt. So that's why some people will try to like use eisegesis, it's called, or eisegetically read into the text to get that type of idea. So that's the only reason I don't like that night. It's just too general for me. So it's way too general. So in my opinion, they should have actually translated it, since the previous verse is talking about the previous midnight. It should have been translated as the following night or the following evening. To me, it would have cleared up a lot of confusion. I understand it doesn't word for word say that in the Hebrew or the Greek, but I'm just saying for a new reader, it would have cleared up a lot of confusion. But anyway, so let's see where are we at here. So we did Exodus 12, Exodus 13, 6 to 12. I'll do that one. This again is talking about the day that they leave Egypt here. So again, oh, go ahead, brother. I don't know if that's old or maybe that's an old one. Okay. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and the seventh day is a feast to Yahuwah. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Nothing leavened shall be seen with you. See, leavened, not yeast.
Mm-hmm.
Neither shall you have leaven in all your borders. Again, that's how it says in the Greek and the Hebrew. Leaven, not yeast, because wine has yeast. It has a different type of yeast that doesn't even make things rise. Again, that's what I don't like about the modern versions. Go ahead, brother.
No, I'm sorry. My phone is acting screwy.
Huh. Okay, now this is interesting. It shall be a sign upon your hand and a memorial before your eyes, not between your eyes, before your eyes, meaning in your mind, like visually before you, in your mind, not physically. Okay, that the law of Yahuwah may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand Yahuwah Elua brought you out of Egypt. So that's interesting. We have in the LXX here, it says as Kurios and Theos as one name. So this is, I believe, showing Yahusha pre-incarnate right here, where your modern English Septuagint say Lord then God together as one name. Okay, this is Yahusha here, Yahuwah Elua, or if you prefer, Yahuwah Elohim. Okay, so it's interesting. This is showing that Yahusha is the one that brought them out of Egypt. Now, what I find interesting is if you go to the Latin Vulgate, just to give a second witness to this, because people might think I'm crazy. They're like, how are you getting that's Yahusha? I'll just show you real quick. If you go to the Vulgate in the book of Jude, some of you guys know where I'm going here. Okay. Let's see. Where's the one where it talks about trying to think the verse. He delivered them from Egypt, but they did not believe. Trying to remember the verse, if it's verse 3, 4. Here we go. Verse 5. Jude 1:5. Now you can only find this in certain manuscripts and certain Greek manuscripts that many of our Bibles don't use, or the Catholic Bibles that use the Vulgate. So it says here, so I want to caution you, those who once knew everything that Yahusha did in saving the people from the land of Egypt, afterwards perished because they did not believe. So they perished because they did not believe in Yahusha. Now, what's interesting here is this is one of the few versions that use the son's name. So most of them will just say Theos in the Greek or Elohim, Elua, and will be generic. This actually has Yahusha here. So to me, I find that interesting. So this again goes with what we just read in Exodus 13, where it has the compound name Yahuwah Elua there, showing Yahusha pre-incarnate. So, and a lot of the apostles knew about this. They knew about that it was Yahusha who was guiding them out of Egypt, and it was the Father as well. It was one person. So this is something that you can see the oneness here. This is something that you should start seeing the oneness in verses like this. So anyway, so let's see here. Let me go to the beginning verse here. I just want to show how, again, this is showing when they left was the 15th. And Masha said to the people, remember this Yom, this day in which you came forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for with a strong hand Yahuwah brought you forth out, and leaven shall not be eaten. For on this day you've gone forth in the month of new grain, and it shall come to pass. Then he talks about, inhabiting the land and all that. Then he goes into the Feast of Unleavened Bread and all that. But he's saying on this day, not the previous night, not the previous day where the destroyer was destroying the Egyptians' firstborn and where Yahuwah protected them. That was the previous night. He's saying on this day they went out of Egypt. So just reiterating there that we have proof scripturally they left on the beginning. Well, maybe not beginning, but they left on the 15th of Abib, not 14th. So I just want to reiterate that. So we have more than enough scriptural evidence to prove that. Okay, Exodus 23, verse 15. So Exodus 23, verse 15. Let's see here. Take heed to keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I charged you at the season of the month of new grain. For in it you came out of Egypt. You shall not appear before me empty. Again, new grain, Abib. That is the definition of Abib. So Abib shouldn't be early enough to where the grain hasn't even started growing. Like people that say it's when it starts growing and it's green ears. The problem with that is if you look at the Exodus story, I think, where is it, Mom? Chapter 9 or chapter 10, where the plagues are happening, it says that the grain was like parched or whatever. Like the grain would have had to be ripened for that to happen to it. So basically, when the Exodus originally happened, it was the time of the year where grain was ripened, ready to eat. It was not just starting to grow. So that's where people get confused and think, it was, B means green ears because the Strong's Concordance says so. You got to realize, too, the Strong's Concordance was based on the King James Bible. Okay. So sometimes in the Strong's it's a little off because it's going on his interpretations of the Hebrew is what it's doing. Because King James, and if you don't believe me, guys, I can send you a link from Nehemiah Gordon. He's admitted it. He's admitted that the guys that did the King James Bible did not know the Hebrew language. Okay. And even though he's not a believer, because I know people are going to say he's not a believer in Yahushua, I don't want to listen to him. At least on linguistics, he knows what he's talking about. He's studied the modern Hebrew language very thoroughly, and he knows what he's talking about. We might have a difference of opinion about the Tetragrammaton, whatever, but he knows what green ears is, and it's not a beep. Like a beep does not mean green ears. So you have a Strong's Concordance that's Christian, that is based on a guy's understanding of the Hebrew language from the King James Bible, which had loads of errors with the Hebrew. He didn't even know. Half of the time they just guessed on Hebrew words of what it's supposed to be. Go ahead, brother.
I would say even when looking at Jeff Benner's like ancient Hebrew lexicon, a lot of his stuff is just pulling from the Strong's. So, the Strong's is good, but it's only going to take you so far. You really got to do your homework as to what a lot of these words mean. What I've found though is when whether it's in the Greek or whether it's in the current Masoretic Hebrew, if you translate that back into the pictographic and you look in the pictographic, a lot of the times you're going to come up with the right definition. Just somehow you preserve that,
Yeah, hieroglyphics. I mean, a lot of these ancient cultures, that's what they had. They had these hieroglyphic languages like the pictograph. They had characters like, drawings as letters, like, person as a letter or animal as a letter. That was very common. Even in ancient Egypt, they had it. It's very, I wouldn't be surprised that the original Egyptian language was some version of the pictograph, and it just kind of, morphed after a while. Like, a lot of these other ancient languages that are hieroglyphics, it probably came from the pictograph. Go ahead.
Are you wait? Did you say that the hieroglyphics came from the Egyptian hieroglyphics came from Hebrew pictograph?
Well, what I'm trying to say is I don't know for a fact, but I could kind of see it happening because you have the Tower of Babel, and if they're still using pictograph at that point, which I don't know. Again, I'm not preaching as doctrine. I don't know. But that's kind of what I was saying. Like, if you have the Tower of Babel, 72 languages, they all had one language at that point. If pictograph was still the one language, I could see them, because there's other ancient cultures that have similar language to the pictograph. What they call hieroglyphics today is very similar to pictograph. The way it works in those languages, you got like characters, animals, and stuff like that, symbols as letters. That. Go ahead.
It's definitely a possibility, and I mean, and I don't like. I think all languages would have come from Hebrew and split up after Babel. I will say that by the time you actually see like the earliest ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, they're far, far removed from what the function of like pictographic Hebrew does. They function completely in completely different ways. Like, just looking at them, they're two completely different languages that don't. And I have to say that because I've seen a lot of people that will demonize the ancient Hebrew, saying that it's no different than the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and very possible that there are some that believe that the ancient Hebrew is not really Hebrew, that it was derived from Egyptian hieroglyphs. But when you really look at those two languages, they have nothing in common other than their pictures.
Yeah. I mean, it was very common for ancient cultures, though, just to use images as their letters rather than letters. That's kind of what I was like getting at, was that there's similarities, because like a lot of these ancient cultures, whether you talk about the Aztecs, this people, that people, they use that type of style of alphabet. I guess is what I was trying to say. I wasn't talking about whether there's paganism or, I wasn't even talking about the spiritual part of it. I was just talking about, like, if you look, you can kind of compare them, and kind of prove to this that other languages could have evolved from the pictograph is because we know in the Paleo, okay, if you look up, what's it called? Phoenician, okay? Phoenician language, okay? This is very similar to the original Paleo Hebrew. This is mostly what we have to go on to figure out you know, what the Paleo Hebrew was. So, like, even a language like this that's a Gentile language is similar. It might not be exact, but it's similar. And so when people even talk about the when they talk about these, when they do all these studies about the Paleo Hebrew, I haven't seen many people mention this, that really the modern Paleo Hebrew is kind of like a Phoenician. It's kind of like a Phoenician language. And I've seen in scripture some of the Phoenicians were Israelites. They're what was his name, Mom, that built the temple, that helped build the temple? What is his name?
Oh, helped build the temple?
Yeah, he was the king of Tyre. Phoenicia.
Oh, yeah.
Hiram, king of Tyre, he was half Phoenician or Tyrenian, and half was it Naphtali was his mom?
I think so.
Yeah, so you have a grafted in guy, technically, that was a king of Tyre. It would seem like, because he knew Yahuwah very well. It would seem the way he talked about Yahuwah to Solomon. He's like, it seemed like he could have been grafted in. So I could definitely see this language, this modern Phoenician here, being related somehow to the original Paleo. So to me, that's proof that a lot of these languages evolved from somewhere. They took inspiration from somewhere. And so, I think that's what happened with the Tower of Babel. Whatever language was the one language they had at the Tower of Babel, those other languages had to come from that one language or evolve from it, at least. as like that was or you could say an archetype for the rest of the 70 something languages, because I think, brother Yahusha, you even came across what the really ancient Greek is very similar to the Paleo Hebrew, or there's similarities. That the Koine Greek now is not really like the original ancient Greek. I think you've came across stuff like that, so I know there's proof to what I'm saying right now. Historically, we can look back how languages have evolved. A lot of these languages, were similar to one another. So anyway, but yeah, so what people usually use with these charts with the paleo is really like Phoenician is what they're using. It's like right here, you got a lot of these are familiar looking. You got let me see if I can really expand on it. You got the Tav. See, you got, let's see if I can find the Aleph on here, the ox head. Okay, so you got, let's see here if there's a way to expand. I'm trying to see if I can expand on it. So right here, you have the Tav right there. Like or I guess that would be something else. You have the X, like a cross like with the circle around it. Then you have, let's see if I can find the ox head. There's a couple of these that are very similar. You know, um, some of these are definitely different. Like the W sound is a Y. It's kind of interesting.
So Rosetta Stone came about during the Ptolemaic
Rosetta
dynasty.
Stone.
Rosetta Stone has a lot to do with the languages.
I only knew about Rosetta Stone as a program.
Oh
I
no,
never
no,
knew there was
there was an origin. It was
okay.
an actual
Okay.
stone
Yeah. Okay.
from back then. I was just looking it up for fun.
So
196 BC.
here's another one. I mean, there's tons of them that you can see. There's definitely a similarity. There's definitely a similarity with the Phoenician alphabet. There's definitely, you can see the Tau is the X. Okay, Aleph, ox head. I mean, so this to me is like probably the closest in modern day we have to like something tangible we can look at. From what I've noticed with all these alphabet charts people put on YouTube videos, this is pretty much what they're using is the modern Phoenician, which the Paleo Hebrew actually went through a couple of evolutions. Supposedly, some claim the Samaritan language is the like most modern last little bit of the Paleo. That's what I've heard. So that's what they claim. Go ahead, brother.
So I've recently done a little bit more research into like the historical dating of like the actual pictographic and then when it slowly began to transition into the paleo. Um, from what I found, Stein, what would have been written, the tablets would have been written, or rather, the Torah would have been written in pictographic. Paleo would have slowly, they would have been in pictographic all the way through Moshe's time, all the way through Yahusha's time. They would have slowly been transitioning into Paleo, I think, towards Yahusha's death, and slowly, like early judge period or judges period.
Interesting. So that means the Ten Commandments movie got a mistake there. That's interesting. That's interesting. I always thought they were right. Because that's the assumption I had was that the paleo, the pictograph was kind of like I always believed it like past Adam and all of them, they weren't really using like something like that. They would have had to use a real spoken language and all that. So I don't know. That was a false assumption on my part. But yeah, this is what I was talking about. Samaritan language and script did indeed evolve from the Paleo Hebrew script. So this I find interesting. And this is why a lot of people are like me are big into researching, testing the Samaritan Torah, because it does show a pre-Masoretic tradition. The Masoretic text, we have no proof that they used any Paleo in their script, regardless of what people want to say that, oh, it's just, And it's not just the language. I've heard people say that all the time. That's a whole nother ball game, whole nother ball of wax for another day. It's not just the language that's the issue in the Masoretic text. There's theology in it too. That's a problem. So, but like anti-Messiah theology. Okay. But anyway, but I find this extremely interesting that the Samaritan Torah would have a late similar version to the Paleo Hebrew script that you can look at. If we ever had the manuscript physically in front of us, we could see how much the Masoretic Yiddish, I like to call it Yiddish Babylonian Hebrew, differs from like even the Samaritan script. Go ahead, brother.
Oh no, old hands.
Okay. So to me, that's interesting. There's definitely proof that other languages came from the Paleo, I guess is what I was trying to say. There's obviously proofs. So, and probably even from the pictograph, we really don't know. It's just speculation. We don't know, how far, I guess you said to the Judges period, it stopped. The pictograph stopped, I think you said. So from Judges on, I guess they were using Paleo, the original Paleo. So yeah, so I mean that's way after the Tower of Babel. We don't know what happened at the Tower of Babel. Then, if that's the case, if that's like real physical, tangible evidence out there that pictograph was used up to Genesis 10, you would have tons of other languages that would have evolved from that. So we don't know. So anyway, but not trying to say that it's the same thing as hieroglyphics. I don't want people thinking I'm saying that. What I'm saying is that these other similar type of languages that are similar to the pictograph could have evolved from the original pictograph, just like Phoenician language evolved from the Paleo, just like the Samaritan language in the Samaritan Pentateuch somehow evolved from the Paleo. That's what I'm trying to say. So just to clear up so people don't misunderstand me. So anyway, but let's see here. Where are we at? I might have to go back to the document here. Yes. So, okay. All right. So I think we did what we did. So we're up to Exodus 34:18. I think we are now. We did 23:15. So, and by the way, guys, I'm using the Brenton's English Septuagint just as a simple version of the LXX here. Okay. So let's see here. If it gets too British, I might go to the Alexandrian Bible. If it gets too British, but should be fine. And you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, as I charged you at the season in the month of new grain. Again, Abib is new grain. For in the month of new grain you came out of Egypt. So Yahuwah is very specific in that month, in this specific month. So that's why, like, a lot of us, we get very, very passionate about the calendar this time of year because it does matter. It's not like, oh, you can keep it whenever. It's like he tells you, I charged you to keep it in this month. So it does kind of matter. So I do understand why people get the attraction to get overzealous about the calendar. I get it because you're trying to make sure that you're keeping it at the right time of the year. So I get it, but we need to be careful we don't start, like one person famously said, majoring in the minors. So we got to make sure we're not putting this above, other theological issues that are really, really important and are non-negotiable. So, just kind of keeping everything in context and not getting too overzealous. So anyway, Leviticus 23:6-8 is the next one. Mom, you want to read that one?
Sure.
And if anyone wants to, I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. If anyone wants to, get a share of reading, just feel free to raise your hand or speak up. I have no problem with that.
Okay. On the 15th day of that month, Yahuwah's feast of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days, you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. For 7 days, present an offering made to Yahuwah by fire, and on the seventh day hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like we said before, pet peeve, leaven, not yeast. Just my little pet peeve here about the translation there. Okay. Other than that, perfectly fine. It's a set apart gathering, set apart assembly. Sacred is like a surprise they use that word. It's such a Catholic word. Evangelical Bible using sacred. That's interesting because sacred or sacred, I forget. It goes into Latin. It's a Latin word. It's a Catholic word. That's one of the things that we coming out of the harlot, being raised a harlot for our whole life, we don't even know these words we're using are Catholic words. Sacred or sanctify, sanctus. I think sanctus is the root of it, is our Latin word.
Sanctus means holy, set apart.
Yeah. Sanctus and all that. So that's the only thing I thought was interesting because this is an evangelical Bible. The new NIV is supposed to be like the ESV. It's supposed to be very Protestant, very interesting. That's kind of interesting. So, but again, food offering, that's kind of paraphrasing there, burnt offering, presenting offering, animal offering to Yahuwah is probably talking about, or a grain offering. Why I would say food offering. So yeah, pretty much self-explanatory there. So now we're at Numbers 20, and don't worry, guys, we're going to get into the whole spiritual aspect too later on. We got one from Acts for later on, one from First Corinthians, and that definitely talks about the spiritual aspect. So Numbers 28:17. All right, so it says here, Numbers 28:17. All right, let me get on the Bretons here. On the 15th day of this month is a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Okay, so again, on the 15th day of this month is a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. So I think this goes into the question Sister Marissa had. I think it was yesterday or this previous weekly Sabbath. So basically, this shows that there's two separate feasts. You got the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th, not the 14th. A lot of us got confused on that in the past because we've been taught, to assume that it's one complete feast because you're eating unleavened bread technically from the 14th to the 21st because the meal of the Passover, you're eating unleavened bread technically. So technically you're eating for 7 days. So the problem is that Scripture, though, defines that feast separate from the Pesach. It's a separate feast. So technically it's a 6-day feast if we want to get technical. Okay, let me just make sure I'm doing my math right here with evening to evening, 15 to 16, 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20, 20 to 21. Yeah, 6 days. So technically the feast only spans for 6 days because the Passover of itself is a separate feast. So
yeah,
we'll go into that later. We got Mark 14, where literally, if you look at Mark 14, it describes the week of unleavened bread and Passover as two separate feasts. So we'll go into that, but there's a lot of confusion about that.
I think one reason, like, I grew up with a lot of Jewish friends, okay? A very Jewish community. Our town was 80% Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because, like, one of the reasons is that no one ever referred it to anything other than Passover. So you grow up thinking that that's the name of this whole time of year for them. I never heard any of them say Feast of Unleavened Bread. I mean, you always knew they were eating matzah the whole week. So you knew that they didn't have, leavening at that time. But it's only been the last few years that I realized this whole thing. the separation of the two feasts.
Yeah, it's like we said the other day, Mom, off the record, the historical context of that is post-Babylonian captivity
Mm-hmm.
going into the first century.
Right.
By the time Yahusha comes to Earth, 3 BC, whatever, from that time, from 3 BC until the time he's dying on the stake, that whole 30-something years, they're calling the whole week Passover that whole time.
Oh.
That whole time. You'll see it where it says the week of unleavened bread is about to approach, called the Passover in the New Testament.
Right.
So it's a historical thing we're not raised with to understand. It was a tradition
Right.
of the Yahudim post-Babylonian captivity to call the whole week Passover. So the whole week became Passover.
Okay.
And so they combined the two feasts by doing that. They're combining the two feasts into one by doing that. Hence why Judaism today thinks it's a 7-day feast, because they're considering the night of the 14th as part of that feast. So that's where like you were saying, that's where the confusion comes on. We don't realize how much traditions, assumptions from the Christian church we're raised with, plus with having Jewish friends, how much, adding to the work they've done in their religion as well. So they have created this whole tradition, calling the whole week the Passover week. They would call in Messiah's time. Yahuwah never said that. He never said it was one feast. He never told them to call it that. That was something they did post-Babylonian captivity. And proof of that, actually, and even changing the 14th to the 15th, you can find is, I think it's the Targums. The Targums in Exodus 12 change it from saying the 14th of Abib to 15th. And they also even change certain terminology that you'll see in the New Testament time period, which is kind of interesting. Like instead of Hebrew or Abri, or every time it talks about a Hebrew, it says a Judean. So in the first century, they started calling them Yahudi, like even all 12 tribes would be Yahudi. So that's what they started calling them. Like if you ever notice in the Septuagint, the word Abri or Hebrew is not used as much. So from like the Hellenistic time period until the first century, they stopped using the word Abri. They stopped using it, and they started using Yahudi for everyone. So you'll see that's where we get the confusion of, well, aren't all 12 tribes the Jews? You see what I'm saying? Because of this tradition of calling all of them Yahudim.
Right.
This now warps our mind, and we've been raised to think that because Judaism tells you that they're all 12 tribes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's where we have to look at context of stuff and look at traditions. It's good to research historical things that are happening around the time of what we're reading from, especially when you're reading prophecy. It's good to know what the setting is of that prophecy. It's good to know, the setting of Paul's letters in the first century. There's a lot of things we don't know about. There's a lot of things we don't know about. I was talking to a sister recently. She had a brother that is like falling away back into Christianity. And, he's telling her that Paul's false and this and that. And, he's talking about, this and that, how Paul was telling, us not to get physically circumcised. And people don't even know that there's a party called the circumcision party.
Yeah.
Of the circumcision was a term about the Pharisees. How many people actually know that? Not many people realize that. Okay, so when it says of the circumcision, he's not talking about people that just righteously obey the command to get circumcised. He's talking about a sect of people, the circumcision party. So when he says of the circumcision, he's talking about Yahudis that were with the Pharisees or the Sadducees of a certain group. And he's talking about of the circumcision did this, did that. And that's why he says, I will that they would just emasculate themselves. Because he's talking about a group of people that preached another good news.
Mm-hmm.
They preached another good news that you had to get physically circumcised right away to get saved. You had to physically keep every aspect of the Torah perfectly on top of belief in Messiah. That's what the circumcision party taught. And that's what he's talking about half the time. So he's not saying don't get circumcised. He's saying keeping the commandments is what matters. meaning including physical circumcision. So what he's saying is stop worrying about these circumcision parties that are just trying to make a prey out of you, just trying to get, all these false converts in, because that's what they were doing. They were bragging about their converts. Oh, I got 100,000 this month and this and that. Like you see that in the Christian church, okay? That they brag about their converts. They say, oh, look at how many I led to Christ this month. That's what the circumcision party was like. They had a false good news. They had false counterfeit salvation that didn't really save anyone. Okay, that's why Yahushua, what did he say to the Pharisees, right? He said, all your little converts you're just making them more of a child of Gehenna. That's all you're doing. And he said that to the Pharisees multiple times. So this is like, we got to understand the first century debates of the first century AD. That's the only way you're going to understand Paul's letters. You have to know the Torah, and you have to understand what he was dealing with back then. You have to understand he was debating not just the circumcision, but Gnostics. He was dealing with Gnostics as well. That's why he kept saying to the Corinthians, why are you denying the resurrection? Don't you know if you deny the resurrection, you have no hope? If Messiah did not resurrect from the dead, we have no hope. That's why he kept saying that to them, because the Sadducees, number one, did not believe in the resurrection. Number two, the Gnostics would not believe in a biblical resurrection because they believe Yahushua was just a ghost on the upright stake or pole, that he was just a ghost. He wasn't really there. He didn't really die. And funny enough, Islam, a couple hundred years, comes right after Gnosticism. All of a sudden, they preached the same thing, that he never really died. It was to deceive people. They even say in their Quran, supposedly. It was that the Most High would deceive people that are trying to believe in him and his son. To me, that doesn't sound like Yahuwah. That's a whole nother story to begin with, but Yahuwah doesn't deceive someone that is turning to him for salvation or repenting. Yahuwah is not going to deceive his people and have his son look like he died, but he didn't. That doesn't sound like Yahuwah. So anyway, but you see, those type of heresies is what Paul was dealing with. That's why he's talking about the resurrection all the time. That's why he's talking about this, talking about that. Even in 1 John, most of us don't realize what John's dealing with the Gnostics. 1 John 4-5 is all about exposing Gnosticism. Most people don't know that. But anyway, I digress. Anyway, but all this stuff is important to understand. Okay, so Numbers 28, 19 to 24. Okay, so whole burnt offering, sacrifice to Yahuwah, 2 calves of the herd, 1 ram, 7 lambs of a year old, they shall be to you without blemish. Their grain offerings shall be fine, flour mingled with oil, 10 deals, 1 calf, 2 tenth deals for a ram. You shall offer a tenth for each lamb. No. And you shall offer, no. I offer 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering to make atonement for you. No. These shall be thus offered daily for 7 days, a gift, sacrifice, sweet smelling savor to Yahuwah. Besides the continual whole burnt offering, you shall offer its drink offering. Okay, so that's verse 24 there. Just trying to see where I'm at. So Deuteronomy 16, 3-4. Yeah. No. All right, so Deuteronomy 16, I'm just getting to there for you guys, and I'll put the screen back on. This is another controversial thing with Deuteronomy 16. Judaism has taught us, supposedly, because the Masoretic text leaves it very vague. And I kind of wonder if the Masoretes started interpreting Deuteronomy 16 as the Passover meal, because they on purpose leave out what type of flocks it's talking about to offer on these Passover sacrifices. To me, there's something fishy going on with how vague they leave Deuteronomy 16. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at Deuteronomy 16, let's start at verse 1-4. Okay. observe the month of new grain, you shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahuwah, your Elohim, because in the month of new grain you came out of Egypt by night. Hence, the 15th at evening, in the beginning of the 15th, like we talked about before, by night. Okay? And you shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahuwah your Elohim, sheep and oxen. Sheep and oxen. I'll show you why that's important later. Okay? The Septuagint tells you what from the herd you're taking. So there's no way you can get the idea that this is the Passover meal. Okay? You're taking sheep and oxen as sacrifices. Okay? In the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose to have his name called upon it. This is talking about the burnt offerings and sacrifices that Yahuwah gave as added commands to the Passover when they built the tabernacle and the temple. So when you had the Levitical priesthood added, the Passover was given more commandments. So this is not even talking about the meal. This is talking about actual sacrifices that were offered on the 14th, sheep and oxen. Okay? And it says here, in the place which he chose. Obviously, we know that's talking about the tabernacle or the temple in Solomon's time. Okay, so it can't be talking about the Passover meal. The Passover meal in Exodus 12, you're having in your own home. Okay, you shall not eat leaven with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came forth out of Egypt in haste, that you remember the day of your coming forth out of Egypt all the days of your life. Now, if I'm not mistaken, isn't this, they mentioned this too, isn't it supposed to be that you're also allowed to boil it too, the sacrifices, which again, the Passover meal you can't boil. So where is that? I want to see that because that's another proof this is not talking about the Passover meal.
Me 16. Oh, that's where you're at.
Yeah, I'm trying to just find the exact verse where it talks about you can boil it if you want, roast it or boil it. Deuteronomy 16, roast or boil it. Because this proves it can't be the Passover meal. Okay, so here we go. Now, some of them paraphrase and try to put lamb there. Lamb's not in the text, FYI. Okay, so as far as to my recollection, lamb should not be there in verse 7. Okay, see, this is what I mean. This is the only thing you got to be weary about with paraphrasers out there is they like to add words in there. Okay, lamb's not there. It's not talking about lamb. You shall boil and roast and eat it in the place which Yahuwah your Elohim shall choose. Again, temple, tabernacle, okay? And you shall return in the morning to your place. So you're returning into the morning and going to your house. Places in this chapter.
What does yours say? Boil or whatever, roast or boil?
Verse 7 of Deuteronomy 16.
See, mine says just roast it.
NIV.
And eat it at the place.
NIV. I wonder if that's the NIV's fault or the Masoretic fault. See, I think the Masoretes at some point were believing or treating this like the Passover meal. Yeah. Yeah, so the Net Bible, which is not too different from the NIV, says it's even worse. It says you must cook and eat it. Oh man, I don't like that. I don't like that because it's making it ambiguous is the word I'm thinking of. It's making it too general. See, at least with the King James, it says you shall roast in. Oh, it just says roast.
Yeah, I think though, like when these translators, when they're translating, they have no idea of what the Torah says, so they don't know that they're, changing the text. They think they're just making it more, understandable.
This is definitely the Masoretic fault here. I wonder if it's even supposed to say roast. Whoa, look at here. The Masoretic actually had the right word. They just decided to put roast. Properly to boil up, hence to be done in cooking, figuratively to ripen. Interesting. I guess if it's used for grain, that would mean ripened grain. Bake, boil, sodden. What the heck? How does this is what I don't understand because Strong's is based on the King James. So that means King James got it wrong. That's kind of funny. I mean, not really because it's deceiving people, but King James puts roast, and the Hebrew says boil, to bake, to sodden. How is soddening roasting something? I mean, maybe if you interpret it in the Middle Ages, like when you boil a roast, maybe, but a roast is like a thing. It's not, what do you call, what is it called, Mom? A type of word that's an action.
A verb.
It's not a verb. Like a roast is a animal that's being cooked. They'll call a roast, but that doesn't mean they roasted it. So I don't know if there was like just ignorance in the King James translators.
It could be.
Because I mean the primary definitions are boil up, to ripen, bake, boil. Roast is like the least primary definition. Seethe, sod, to sodden. Sodden is something I don't think you're roasting it. I seriously doubt that. So
I don't know that word. I don't know what that means.
Sodden, yeah. And let me see if I have the I wonder if I have the ancient Hebrew lexicon. No, I don't. Okay. So but bashal means to boil. I mean, that's a primary definition. So I don't understand. The reason it's important, guys, is because with boil there, even in the Masoretic text, you can't claim it's the Passover meal. You can't claim it.
Mm-hmm.
It's only to be roasted, and it's very important that we understand that. You go back to Exodus 12, it says you only roast it. It's not, it even says it can't be boiled. So you can't, and I've done this before. I've, by error, using the Masoretic text, mind you, and Bible's based on it because most Masoretic text Bibles take that Hebrew word and mistranslate it as roast. So it makes the person think Deuteronomy 16 is talking about the meal. It's not talking about the meal. It's talking about offering oxen and sheep as offerings. And that's what is being boiled. You're boiling the oxen. You're boiling the sheep as an offering. That's why it says you'll return to your house in the morning. For the Passover meal, you're not leaving your house. So this is a big deal. Like a lot of people have gotten misunderstood this chapter. And that's where they get the idea, oh, we can't ever eat the lamb until the Levitical priesthood. I used to teach this. Guilty as charged. Used to teach this until I really got into the Septuagint and saw how much clearer it is that it's talking about what the priestly duties, what they're doing with these sacrifices. And you'll see that in the I think it's Second Chronicles 30 and 35. If you look at that, it will show all these sacrifices that they had to do for the night of the Passover. So this is actually talking about the offerings. This is not the Passover meal here. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day is a set apart day, a feast to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not do it in any work in it, but what must be done. Now, this is where we get the idea, and it's correct, that if you need to cook on the high days of unleavened bread, you can. And especially at least on the first high day, because it says it right here. If there's any work that must be done, you're allowed to do it. Meaning, if you need to bake bread for the week of unleavened bread, you can go ahead and do it. If you need to cook, you can go ahead and do it. So that's another thing we're not taught, is that certain high days that are definite feasts, since you're making something that has to be eaten, you can cook on. So anyway, so just to explain that, yes, you can cook on the first day of unleavened bread, and I do believe so on the last day of unleavened bread as well. Even though they're high days, they're Sabbaths that you can cook on. 7 weeks shall you number from yourself when you begun to put the sickle to the grain. Now, this is where it's important to match scripture with scripture. To get the context of this, guys, you have to go to Leviticus 23, verse 13 to 15, I think, is where it talks about what day you're actually putting the sickle to the grain. And it talks about what day you're counting from. Now, this is a whole big conundrum people have been having because unknowingly, because we trust Judaism, we've been trusting in, mainly, I would say most of us, when we first came into Torah, we're trusting in the Sadducean view of counting the 50 days, or what people call counting the Omer. Okay? Because the Sadducean view is that you count that weekly Sabbath following Passover. And that's what the Sadducean view was. The Pharisee view, even though they're not perfect on their calendar, they were right in this action that you are to start your 50-day count the day after the high day of unleavened bread, the first high day of unleavened bread. That's why in the Targum on Kalos I was sharing with Sister Marissa earlier, why it paraphrases. This is why sometimes it's good to have a paraphrase every once in a while, because sometimes it gets ambiguous, like the Sabbath. Okay, the Targum on Kalos actually says here. Let's see here. If I can get it right here where it's talking about it. Okay, speak with the sons of Israel. Okay, right here. Leviticus 23:11, Targum Onkelos, the Omer shall be lifted after, no. No. So he shall uplift the Omer before you, who to be accepted before you after the day of the festival, or in the it seems like in the Aramaic they have a parenthesis here. Yoma Taba, I guess, means after the festival day. Shall the priest lift it up? So the festival day, mind you, in the other versions that just say Sabbath, okay, or after the morrow. Sometimes it will just say after the morrow on most of the versions. So you're still trying to figure out when is the Omer being lifted up. And actually, let's see here. The context of this too can be found in verse 7. So if you go to verse 7, let's see here. If I'm not mistaken here. So it says, on the first day shall be a set apart gathering to you. You shall do no servile work. You shall offer whole burnt offerings to you, who is 7 days. And the 7 days shall be a set apart gathering to you. You shall do no work, or no servile work. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, yada, 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 yada. So now he's talking about the first fruits offering here. Verse 11. And when you, okay, so where does it talk about the, I'm looking for a specific verse here. Here we go, verse 15. Sorry, guys. So verse 15 is where everything gets confused here, because it says, you shall number to yourselves the day after the Sabbath. So there's two opinions. Like I said, Sadducees think it's talking about the day after the weekly Sabbath. So that's why you see a lot of people celebrating Pentecost on a Sunday, because they're counting 50 days from a Sunday. So you see what I'm saying? So, but the text says after the Sabbath. Now, in the Targums, it makes it very clear what the Sabbath is talked about. It says, okay, hold on a second. I think someone is trying to get in. I could have swore. Oh, that's weird. Okay. And count to you after the festival day, from the day that you brought the Omer of elevation, 7 weeks complete they shall be. So it's saying that the Omer was brought on the day after the high day, essentially. You are to count from that day forward 50 days. So the Targums are giving you a paraphrase of Sabbath as the festival day, showing you that it's the high Sabbath of that week, the first high Sabbath. It's literally the day after first day of unleavened bread. Mm-hmm. And that's why the Septuagint, I think in this chapter 2, it says, instead of Sabbath, it says after the first day, meaning after the first day of unleavened bread. So we have multiple witnesses that Leviticus 23:15 was never referring to a weekly Sabbath. So that was a miscalculation by the what is it called? The Sadduceans, because they had their own certain calendar. The Pharisees had their own calendar, and the Pharisees, to my knowledge, were pretty close to Yahushua's calendar that he kept with the apostles. The only difference I would say is they kept Pesach on the wrong day. So I would say that is the only just a case. That's the only difference. Mainly that what I've seen is that they kept Pesach on the wrong day. Because if you look in the New Testament accounts, you'll see that they kept it a day later than Yahushua and the apostles. Like the day that Yahushua was dying on the stake, their Passover, Yahushua's Passover with his disciples, was from the previous night. So that's why your New Testament say, they didn't want to come, to the Romans to be unclean ritually on their Passover, because their Passover, the Pharisees' Passover, was on the 15th. They were doing it the wrong way. So anyway, just to explain that. So sorry about the long expositioning there, but I just felt like it was needed there. So, all right. So where are we at? We are, okay. So I need to also read verse 16. And then after that, I think we're almost going to be in the Brit at that point. So Second Chronicles, is it 30, I think? Let me just see here. Second Chronicles 8, verse 13. Mom, could you read that for me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I gotta get up for a second.
Okay.
This nail going in me.
All right. According to the daily requirement for offerings commanded by Moshe for the Shvats, new moons, and the 3 annual feasts, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay, that was it?
That was it.
Okay, so I think what I was trying to point out there in verse 13 of Second Chronicles 8 is the offerings that had to be made. Because one of the objections we hear a lot, like this time of year, is, well, we need to fully keep the feast, and are we picking and choosing or not? So the thing is that even with the weekly Sabbaths and new moons, we are not able to fully keep at this moment in time. As far as the offerings go, you cannot keep them. You cannot keep aspects of the new moon. You cannot keep aspects of the Sabbaths. Even with the Sabbaths, we're memorializing them, because in the Levitical priesthood, they had to offer things. They had to offer animals as sacrifices. They had to offer grain offerings and drink offerings every Sabbath. And even when you talk about daily things, a lot of us don't realize this. If you go in the book of Numbers, I forget if it's chapter 7 or 6, it talks about all the offerings that the priests had to give 7 days a week, like every single day of the week.
Yeah.
So technically, we are trusting in Yahuwah's mercy because we can't do these things. That's the reality of the situation. We're in a Babylon. We're not in a Levitical priesthood. So the way I would answer a question like that is, if we're being fair, there's very few of the commands that, as far as the appointed times go, including the Sabbath, that we're able to fully keep. So the answer would be no. We're not picking and choosing. We're just we're keeping what we can and not keeping what we can't. Yahuwah desires, obedience over sacrifice. Like, he would rather us refrain from doing something if it's going to be half ass'd, like that's the thing. So and that's the best way I could explain it to someone. So no, we're not picking and choosing. Don't feel false guilt from the enemy. You're not picking and choosing when all you're doing on the Sabbath is resting, fellowshipping, and resting spiritually in Yahuwah. That's all we can do. All we can do is what's not part of the Levitical priesthood. And essentially it's resting, fellowshipping, not cooking, not doing our own pleasure, like those things that don't require a human priesthood. So anyway. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know that's a cause of concern coming this time of year. I understand that. Second Chronicles 30, verse 13 and 21. I might do this one just to give you a break. 30, 13, and 21, I said. Okay. Yeah. A great multitude were gathered to Jerusalem to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the second month, a very great congregation. If I remember correctly, context here is that they were unclean. This was post Babylonian captivity, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
This is Hezekiah's. Is this Hezekiah's or Josiah's?
Hezekiah.
Okay. So Hezekiah's would definitely been post Babylonian. Okay. So they would have not been clean enough after the 70 year captivity right away. Plus, they had to put away their wives, if you remember correctly,
Yes.
when they first got back from Babylon. They had all these Gentile wives they had to divorce, or if you want to say put away. Okay, they put away them because they were unequally yoked. And, so let's see here. So that's what this context is. They had to purify themselves in the second month to keep the backup Passover. Okay, and they arose and took away the altars that were in Jerusalem and all which they burnt to false mighty ones. They tore down, cast into Brook Kidron. So we can even say this is a Tanakh instance where before they're keeping the Passover, they're kind of worried about not taking it unworthily, right? They're breaking down the altars, breaking down the idols before they're even taking the Passover, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So they're getting themselves ready, and then they're keeping the Pesach. Then they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the second month. And the priests and Levites repented and purified themselves and brought whole burnt offerings into the house of Yahuwah. So this is what we were just reading about in Deuteronomy 16, the whole burnt offerings that they have to give on the night of the 14th. So just to bring the context there, you can see that. Okay, and verse 21 as well. Okay. And the children of Yasharel who were present in Jerusalem kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with great joy. And they continued to sing hymns to Yahuwah daily. And the priests and Levites played on instruments to Yahuwah. Now, I think at this point, they could have already been combining the two, because I see it right here. It says, kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days. So you already have them traditionally molding the two feasts together, calling it one feast. As a custom, they're calling it one feast. So, yeah, I would say, somewhere in 400 or 500 BC, this is when this happened. So, it wasn't always like this, as you see in the Torah. In the Torah, it doesn't combine them as one feast. So this tradition, remind you guys, this is already post-Babylon. This is post-Babylonian captivity. They probably already were starting to have Rosh Hashanah and all that for the Feast of Trumpets. You got to realize they were not perfect at this point. They had to cleanse themselves as they were keeping the Passover, no less. So they had to unclean this problem in keeping it at second month.
The 23rd verse says, the whole assembly then agreed to celebrate the festival 7 more days. So for another 7 days, they celebrated joyfully.
Yours says more?
Yeah. It looks like as they were going along, they realized how unclean they were, and they were making a lot of.
I don't think more is supposed to be there.
Okay.
It's not in the Greek.
Okay.
Let me see if the Hebrew has more there. I don't think so. This is one of the things that I see these evangelical translators are guilty of.
They brought like thousands of bowls and.
Other. Interesting. So the Masoretic saying that they kept it for 14 total days.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yet you don't see that there. Oh no, my bad. My fault. Didn't see it. Other 7 days. Okay, yeah. So I guess as a tradition, yeah, they kept it for another 7 days. Kind of similar to when King Solomon did it. I wonder if they're copying his tradition.
Yeah, well, this was said. It says there was great joy in Jerusalem for since the days of Solomon, son of David, king of Yisrael, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem.
So they probably were so joyful they just felt like adding another 7 days to it. And you it's not a commandment. It's not saying, Hezekiah or Solomon's not saying you do it this way.
Right.
Context always with this stuff. It's tradition, just like Maccabees. It was a tradition that they celebrated this rededication of the temple that was similar to the Feast of Sukkot. It was not a have to. Yahuwah didn't say, thus says Yahuwah, you celebrate the Feast of Dedication. Yahuwah didn't say that about this either. He didn't say that this is authoritative by me to do it for 14 days. He did not say that. So this is just them being overjoyful and adding another 7 days.
Coming out of where they came from, they knew there was a lot wrong.
Like, I would call that optional. Like, what you're seeing here is optional. So, yeah. But I just wanted to put that out there, just in case, because I know there's other arguments out there, like with these extra feasts and all that. So I just want to kind of put that out there. This is Hezekiah and them doing this of themselves.
Right.
There's nothing that Yahuwah is saying that he wanted them to do that. They felt overly joyed and wanted to keep it another 7 days of themselves. So anyway, so 2 Chronicles 35, verse 17. Wow, it's already almost 6 o'clock now. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how much time we got. We might have to do the resurrection study another day. The children of Yashreel that were present kept the Passover at that time, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 7 days. Again, they're calling Passover and the unleavened bread. Unleavened bread here is what it seems. But what's weird to me is I wonder if they added a day, because this is what doesn't make sense. It says that they kept the Passover at that time and the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days. So are they adding an extra high day? I don't know. There's a lot of tradition going on at this time post-Babylon. So I would take what you're reading here with a grain of salt. I would not say that means that matzah is 7 days, because technically if you count from the 15th to the 21st, I think it's 6 days. I could have possibly miscounted, but when I was counting on my fingers evening to evening, I only got 6 days for the 15th to the 21st.
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother. It's very possible I'm wrong. Go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, to the start of the 21st would be 6 days, but do you end at the start of the 21st, or do you go through the 21st?
Let me see here. I think
so.
14th at evening.
Because isn't the last? I thought that you have Pesach is 1 day, and then then you have 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Okay, so let's see here.
I could be wrong. No?
So last night would have started it, right? Last night would have started Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yeah.
So let's do that, like you're saying. So let's go last night till tonight, 1 day. Tonight to Tuesday would be day 2, so on and so forth. Day 3, 4.
No, it is
5.
6 days.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you stop at the beginning of the 21st or at the end of the 21st?
And I guess the end at 21st, yeah.
So then that would be 7 days.
Oh, okay. I don't know. That's why I was saying before I might be wrong with my count, because I was trying to figure out what they're talking about in 2 Chronicles. All of a sudden, I'm like, that can't be right. There's Passover, and then you got another 7 days. I'm like, how is that how is that working? Well, okay, so I get what you're saying.
No,
So yeah,
no, I mean I've always seen it as Pesach is not included in those seven. Pesach is a day in and of itself. So 8 days
yeah,
altogether.
yeah, okay. I'm trying to see what you're talking about here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, yeah. So that would put us next Sunday then. Okay. All right, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, because you would start your count at the beginning of the 15th. So 15 to 16 is 1, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. But you're going to the beginning of the 21st. If you go all the way to the end of the 21st, that's a whole nother day. So it's 7.
Yep. Yeah, you're 100% correct. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I forgot you're counting. Oh, crud.
EA
Stupid,
Sports. It's
stupid,
in the game.
stupid cursor. What are you doing? What are you doing? Stupid. I hate it when I have an app on the taskbar like that. And then my stupid thing wants to not on the Shabbat. Okay. Come on, close window. Dummy computer. This computer wants to act up today for some reason. All right. I don't know why it's doing that. Hopefully it's not going to pop up again. I don't know why it did that. My bad about that. All right. Yeah. Go ahead, Marissa. If you want to read the next scripture, let me just get back to the document. Sorry again about the viewers and listeners. That was out of my control. All of a sudden, the stupid cursor wants to click on something out of nowhere. I'm trying to click on something else, and then it clicks by mistake.
Okay, can you pull it up?
Yeah, let me see here where we're at. We did Second Chronicles 35:17, right? Okay, so I'm gonna get it up for you, sis. It's gonna be for Ezekiel 45. 7. Let's see here. Ezekiel 45. 45:21.
Okay.
Ezekiel 45:21. All right, so here we go. This should be an easy enough version here.
Oh, it's not there.
It's not there. A
No.
stupid shared screen killing me here. All right, here you go. Now it should be there.
Okay. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, you shall celebrate the feast of the Passover, and for 7 days unleavened bread shall be eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Passover.
Yeah, so see how this is, it's very interesting. It seems to be going back and forth with combining the feast together. Because now you have it saying, you shall celebrate the feast of Passover. And obviously there's no commas in the original text. And for 7 days, unleavened bread will be eaten. So I can see how people are confusing this in modern day Judaism. You already have it kind of, I could be wrong, but like, it seems like the captivity time period, they were already kind of blending them together. Oh, go ahead, brother.
Considering that it's actually 8 days altogether, right? Pesach is 1 day, and then you have the 7 days of unleavened bread. That's so it's 8 altogether, and it actually fits really well. It mirrors the fall feasts, right? You have 8 days of Shavuot.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Just the way it's worded, like if someone doesn't know it's actually combined to 8 days, I could see how people in this walk would like be like, oh, well, isn't the Passover the whole week? Because it's like worded that way. So it seems like either the Mazarites already had this tradition or something happened because Let me see if this Brentons has it worded that way. Yeah, it's still very vague. It's still very vague because a lot of the times you'll see as we get to Mark 14 later, they'll be separated again.
Right.
So it's like the problem is that there's not consistency with separating the two feasts here. And it's like, the post Babylonian captivity you already have. Like the only thing that would give us a clue that it's separate from Passover is that it says 7 days you eat unleavened bread. And we know now when you really think about it, sunset to sunset. If Passover was part of that, it would be 8 days. So that's the only clue there that it has to be two separate feasts in that verse. Because without punctuation marks, that's going to look as one thought. Most people would take that as one thought. You shall have the feast of Passover 7 days. You shall eat unleavened bread. So they'll think the whole week is the Pesach, and that's the way Judaism would probably take that verse today, if I'm not mistaken. Go ahead, brother. I don't know if that's an old hand. Let's see here. Okay, so now we're at Acts 12. Okay. Let's see, Acts 12:3. Right. Let's see here. Let's try to get this here. This is weird. Oh, I see why. You gotta put the chapter number for it to go there. Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. And when he saw that this pleased the Yahudi, he added to apprehend also Shamun Kapha. They were the days of Patiri. I guess that's supposed to be Passover, but the Syriac has it like written really weird. But see, this is another thing too. Certain manuscripts will say the days of Passover, others say the days of unleavened bread. This is like another instance where you got this tradition already. It's already being called the week of Passover in certain versions. I forget which. I think the really modern versions worded Passover. Well, you see, like these are the days of unleavened bread. Go ahead, brother. I don't know if is that a new hand? Okay. Hold on a second. Maybe it's just an old hand. Let's see here. 1 Corinthians 5, 6-8. Sister Marissa, would you like to read 1 Corinthians 5, 6-8?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let me get the shared screen up for you. It's a little slow today. It's a little weird. Okay. 1 Corinthians 5, 6. There we go.
Okay. Your boasting is not good. You know that a little yeast leavens the whole good batch of dough, don't you? Get rid of the old yeast so that you may be a new batch of dough, since you are to be free from yeast. For the Mashiach, our Passover, has been sacrificed. So let's keep celebrating the festival, neither with old yeast nor with yeast that is evil and wicked, but with yeast-free bread that is both sincere and true.
Yeah. Yep. So this is what I was referring to, what Sister Marissa just read here, right? This is spiritual leaven that he's talking about. So he's talking about your actions, your fruit, your works, if it's not lined up with scripture, can be leaven. Your teaching, if you're a teacher like me or any other shepherds out there, you could have leaven in your teaching that you might need to purge out during this time. That you really should have purged out before. For us, for our group, it would have been before last night. All year round, you should be really trying to get ready to purge out any false teaching that you might have. So really, sin and bad theology or bad doctrine are the two types of spiritual leaven that we see. Paul's really dealing here with the sin part. Having a wicked intentions, being unleavened is being compared to being pure in heart, right? So that's what he's talking about here. And right here, again, shadow does not have to be physical, because this is the biggest argument. Other brethren out there make usually to me, or brother Yahusha, is that, well, it has to be he had to die on the day of the Passover on the 14th or whatever. Or if they believe the 15th is the Passover, they believe it because they think he has to fulfill it literally. It's a shadow. It's a shadow. It's metaphoric. He did not have to literally die on the day of Pesach. He died on the feast of on the high day of unleavened bread, and there's multiple places that show that his physical impalement during the day, they were already at the they were basically, if I'm not mistaken, they were, they well, actually, it would be he was dying going into unleavened bread, I should say. So he was dying going into the first day of unleavened bread. So if the Pesach started the night he was taken, 5 p.m. or whatever time Greco-Roman wise that he died the following afternoon, it was already going into the festival of Matzah. So he didn't have to literally die the night of the Pesach. That's what I'm trying to say. He didn't have to die when the Passover lambs were being slaughtered and roasted. There was no requirement for that. It's a spiritual metaphorical shadow, meaning it's not literal, it's metaphorical. So, he's not literally a lamb. It's metaphorical, it's spiritual language. Is to show that he's our offering for sin. So, as in the way that the Passover lamb was like an offering for sin on the night of the 14th, he is our offering for sin. As they were going into their high day, they had to bury him. So it's very clear that he died on the first day of unleavened, going into the first day of unleavened bread, not on the first day of unleavened bread, but he died going into the beginning of the 15th, because he would have died at what, Mom? 4 p.m. They say, most scholars say, that day. So you have it going into that evening of the beginning of the first day of unleavened bread. So by the time they bury him, they don't break his bones and all that. They're going into the first day of unleavened bread. So just to explain that, because I know a lot of people will say, well, he had to die when they were eating the lambs. And I'm like, why? Why is that the case? There's no scripture from the Tanakh that says it had to literally happen like that. There's no, even the breaking of his bones, it just said they didn't break his bones. It didn't say which day it had to happen on. It just said they didn't break his bones to fulfill the prophecy. In the prophecy, it just says they did not break his bones. That's all it says. It doesn't say what day, what evening. So again, be very careful, because we can start adding to scripture and adding requirements to messianic prophecy without even realizing it. And, we're no better than Judaism if we're doing that. So anyway, so just wanted to mention that. So this is the last one we have for this initial study here. I'm going to see, we might not have enough time for this resurrection one. I'm going to try to fit it in, but we might have to do a part 2 for the resurrection part. So let's see here. Mark 14:1. Oh, go ahead, brother. Did you want to say something, Ak?
Oh no, did it have a hand up?
No. You were just unmuting, so I didn't know.
No, I'm just having a lot of phone issues. And Wi-Fi
Okay.
issues.
Oh, dang. Yeah, I'm having a little bit today too. I noticed I was muffled a couple of times, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the Wi-Fi. I'm on hotspot for goodness sakes. Um, Now it was 2 days before Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. So this one of the reasons I like going to Mark 14 when describing this to someone, it clearly talks about them as two different feasts. Doesn't say it's the same thing. So, like Judaism combining that is unscriptural. Yahusha, I guess he knew what he was dealing with in the first century, because some people will say this will be their argument. Oh, well, he never rebuked the Pharisees for them calling the whole week Passover. But did he call the whole week Passover? Did he say to his disciples, you should call these 8 days Passover? No, he doesn't. So that's just a historical tradition that they were doing. You could argue that it's not wrong, but at the same time, Yahuwah separated it every time in the Torah. He never called it the same thing. He said Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th, not the 14th. Passover starts on the 14th. It's two separate feasts. So this is where the whole um, this is where the whole confusion, I think, went. And so and now this makes sense. What you point out, Brother Yahusha, makes sense. Now it makes sense why it's called a festival of 7 days, the festival on unleavened bread. So because if you end at the end of the 21st, technically the feast ends at the beginning of the 22nd. So I see what you're saying. It's 7 days as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And if they're combining the Feast of Unleavened Bread with Passover, technically the Jews today, I guess, would have to keep it 8 days if they did it scripturally. If they're going to combine two as one, they would be keeping it 8 days. Go ahead, sister.
Okay, Passover starts at the end of the 13th day, doesn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the end of the 13th day would fall into the beginning of the 14th.
Yeah. So I didn't realize I messed up with the counting of the 15th to the 21st. Technically, the last high day would end on the beginning of the 22nd. So what Brother Yahusha was trying to correct me on is that technically it is 7 days for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but Passover is not included. If Passover was included, then from the 14th, the beginning of the 14th to the end of the 21st, going into the 22nd, you have 8 days. So technically, if they want to combine it as one feast like they do in modern Judaism, they might as well keep it for 8 days. Because that's what would be going on realistically. But as you can see here in Mark 14:1, it's two feasts. They separate them. So it says so they were basically at, I guess, a Tuesday, this would be, right? In Gregorian calendar wise. So they would be 2 days before the Passover and the Festival of Unleavened Bread. So the Mark 14:1 is separating them as two separate feasts. And it's saying 2 days before them. So that would have been, I guess, a Monday or Tuesday, depending on when you think he would have died, like what day of the week you think he would have died.
So, Doug, would that be kind of like the same with Sukkot? You know how some people do 9 days instead of 8 days?
Well, I think they do it 8 days. It's just Hebraically is different from Gregorian wise. We would think it's 9 days Gregorian wise because we're considering a day starting at midnight. So that's kind of the problem, is the Gregorian calendar in modern Western civilization considers midnight, you're at the next day. So if you go by midnight, yeah, I guess that's where people think it's like an extra day, but it's not really. It's the feast was 8 days because it actually says, and it's just a little bit more clear that it's 8 days. I think that's where the confusion about unleavened bread is, because I think actually the difference with actually Sukkot is not unleavened bread then, because Sukkot is literally an 8-day feast. For the Passover, for not Passover, for unleavened bread to be 8 days, you would have to combine the 14th with the rest of the week of unleavened bread to get 8 days. But with Sukkot, it's literally one feast for 8 days. So there's a little confusion there because it literally says, I think in Leviticus 23, we can go there right now. Go ahead, brother.
Was not
So,
a it's not like definitely not an 8-day feast similar to, I get that, but it is still like you have, I don't know, I guess you could say 8-day muadim, maybe appointed time.
yeah, like I guess the reason I was making a distinction is because Passover is one feast by itself. So you have unleavened bread for 7 days, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's one festival. Passover is a second festival. I get where people I think get confused is because, like I said, in modern times, the Jews call the whole week Passover. So people are looking at it as 8 complete days, like Sukkot, but it's really not. It's like you have the 13th, the end of the 13th to the 14th. That's one Moedim, and then the 15th to the end of the 21st would be a separate Moedim. Like that's why we have 7. Like if you count it in Leviticus 23, there's 7 main Moedim. So one of those, the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread in Leviticus 23 are 2 separate Moedim. They're not considered the same. So I'd say it's 8 days, I guess, of 8 combined days of festivity. I guess I would say what you were trying to say. I think that's what you were trying to say. Like 8 days of being festive and observing festivals for that week. So, but it is 2 separate festivals. So that's where people get confused. Their Sukkot is actually one complete. It's like I think even the last great day. I could be wrong. It's very possible, but from what I remember in Leviticus 23, they consider the last great day, I think, part of Sukkot. I could be wrong. So I think that's where the confusion is. Oh, go ahead, brother.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, no, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it gets confusing because Sukkot is a lot more clear. It's a lot more clear. For some reason, Yahuwah felt the need to really make Sukkot clear that it's one complete feast in Leviticus 23. He's like super clear about it. Yeah, Festival of Tents. So he goes on talking about tell the Israelis. That's funny. ISV Israelis. Yeah, they're a little modern. So yeah, it talks about the 8th day is also to be a set apart assembly for you. Bring offerings made by fire as a set apart assembly. You shall do no servile work. So yeah, that's where the confusion comes because it looks like he's separating it, but he's really not. So that the first 7 days of Sukkot, and then you have the last great day, what they called at Yahusha's time period, the 8th day. That was the day at the feast in John where he's like, whoever's thirsty, I'm the one who has the spring of living water. So Yahusha, by the way, it's good that you brought this up, brother, because I wanted to show people this. This is another oneness thing. If Yahusha's not Yahuwah, he can't say this. Okay, because he's saying, let's see, out of his belly will flow. No, no. 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 All right. John 7, verse 38. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said. So he's saying the scripture is referring to himself. Rivers of living water will flow from within them. So meaning if you believe in him specifically, you'll have the rivers of living water flowing in you from him. Now, people might be saying, how does that mean that he's the Father? I'm going to show you real quick. Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah, right? Right, Mom?
I don't know where you're going.
Out of his belly come living
I'm not
waters.
sure where that is, Isaiah.
Okay. All right. So there's a couple of them actually here. Isaiah 55:1. Come, all you who are thirsty. Didn't he just say that in John 7? Come who are thirsty. Come to the waters, you without money. Come buy and eat. Come buy wine without price. Milk and honey without money. Yeah, it should be without price. That's a little modern. Let's see here. I know there's another one too where he's directly quoting from John 7:38. I'm going to look at the cross reference for that because there should be a Tanakh one that's word for word. So this though is a clue to the oneness here, because he himself is saying that if you believe in me, this is going to happen. And the scripture he's quoting from, why don't they have it? That is strange. All right, hold on. Some of these footnotes I notice in certain Bibles are very biased. They don't want to give you cross references on certain Tanakh verses. Out of his belly. So I know there's one right here. This is where he's referencing from. Out of his belly. Okay, where exactly in the Tanakh is that? Come on. It's weird. I don't know why I can't find a cross reference for that. I wonder if it's in the Septuagint. Huh. Interesting. So this would be a missing prophecy. Interesting. This could have been taken out of the Tanakh. Supposedly, this reference is not in our Bibles today.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking. Doesn't.
It should be. This sounds like something that would be in an Isaiah or Ezekiel. This is an interesting reference. The guy tried to find something going back to it. Proverbs 18:4 in the Septuagint. The words of a man's mouth are as deep waters, and the wellspring of wisdom, wisdom, as a flowing brook. In fact, so this is interesting because if it's talking about a person in wisdom, that would definitely go back to Yahusha. That's kind of interesting. I don't know, guys. I can't find the exact literal word for word quote. See, this is why I'm saying, like, I'm not a big person of saying that there's not that all we have in scripture is just scripture, because this is clearly something he's quoting from, and it's not in our Bibles.
Yeah.
He's clearly quoting from a scripture. He says, as the scripture says.
It's annoying. Yeah.
So just like John 17, where there's a prophecy missing about Judas, just saying, there's multiple times where Yahusha quotes from something that we can't find today.
Yeah.
And pisses me off.
It
really makes me mad.
It's hard because,
that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole nother scriptural study about a historical study I wouldn't mind doing at some point, showing that even the Roman Catholic Church fathers mentioned that the rabbis at their time were messing with the Tanakh and taking stuff out. So I wouldn't be surprised if John 7:38 was in the Tanakh at some point, like that phrase, out of his belly flows a spring of living water. Because wait a minute, you have forsaken. Hold on. Yeah, go ahead, brother, while I'm looking for this. You have forsaken.
It's possible that it is actually still in there. It's just not, you can't see it. And what I mean by that is just looking at certain words in the pictographic and certain verses in the pictographic. Like, for instance, when you look at Barashit, it makes it very clear where, obviously we know John, where John was pulling from when he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Yahuwah. But we know he pulled from the Targums, but you don't even need the Targums. When you look at the pictographic from Barashit, it makes it extremely clear that that's John 1:1 right there. As well as when Yahushua said, if you don't eat of me, then there is no life in you. When you look at that word Barashit in the pictographic, it makes it very clear what Yahushua meant. So it's possible that it's in there. It's just been, you just can't see it looking at it in English or in Greek.
This was the one I was thinking of. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out his cisterns for themselves. You know, how the Proverbs and the Psalms talks about drink for your own cistern. So this is allegorizing, like Brother Yahusha's talked about when we did the Proverbs study earlier in the year. Drinking out of someone else's cistern can also refer to idolatry.
Right.
So saying they hewed out cisterns for themselves, meaning they seek gods for themselves, mighty ones for themselves. Broken cisterns that cannot hold no water, meaning vain idols
Right.
that can't hold the springs of water. And that's Jeremiah 2:13. But notice how it says they've forsaken me, Yahuwah. Yahushua is saying from him is going to come living waters.
Right.
So
right there.
either they're the same person or you have to reject the New Testament. That's one of the two options you have. It's because Yahushua is claiming to be the Father all the time. And I check, if those of you that are foreign to this topic, we just did a oneness study. Brookie. If you guys are interested, it's back up on the YouTube. We did a oneness recording a couple of weeks ago, probably a month ago by now. So please check that out. But this is one of the verses I always like to go to, because Yahuwah is calling himself the living waters. Then you have in John 7:38, Yahushua says, from him, Yahushua, comes forth the living waters. And I know some people will say, oh, well, that just means Yahuwah's Ruach is in him, and they'll try to tiptoe and what does Kevin Richardson say about the female lions prancing around? They
Pussyfooting
around. They try to go around the issue of the fact that Yahushua is claiming to be the Father.
Yeah.
So some people will be pussyfooting around when you're trying to show them this. It's very clear. It's very clear. And if it's not, then you have an idolatry issue, because then you would have a normal human male claiming to be the Most High.
Yeah.
Who is not. I'm playing devil's advocate right now. If you don't believe in the oneness and you're stubborn on that, then you have to claim that the New Testament is serving another mighty one. There's only one or two options, because you can't have Yahushua saying this and then he's wrong.
That's right.
You can't. If he's saying it, he says what he says.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's the fountain of living waters. They come from him. He's not saying that the Father put his spirit in me and that the Father's the living waters. So, you can't, dance around that fact. So anyway, sorry for the rant there, but this is the point. So, very clear here. So we're at the end of the Festival Unleavened Bread study. We got very little time right now, and I know certain people have got to rest or get some rest, going into day 2 of Unleavened Bread. So I think, Yahuwah willing, very soon we're going to redo this other study, Resurrection in the Tanakh. I was trying to get it in today, but, Yahuwah knows best. He wanted more exposition, so that's fine. I have no problem with that. Hopefully you guys got something out of today, and hopefully it was edifying for you guys. And Shabbat Shalom, Chag Semak, Festival Matzah, Shalom.
Maybe we could do the second part, the last day of Unleavened Bread.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It says very good idea.
What did she say?
So do it on the second high day.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too. Excellent. Yeah.
All right, viewers and listeners on YouTube, wherever else you're going to see this, have a great